So the Indiana Pacers have been eliminated in 7 games by the Cavaliers, but it was a hell of a series, and the Pacers had themselves a hell of a season. And I'm pretty sure I talked about these guys maybe a couple of weeks ago, but I feel like talking about them again because it's an interesting team with a lot of interesting directions that they could go in. So, the thing that I want to talk about is, can they acquire a second star player next to Oladipo? Because you're in an interesting situation here where Oladipo, before he became a top 20 player, was probably overpaid at $21 million a year. But now that he's really good, he's actually like significantly underpaid. So you have him on a great contract for a while, and that gives you some more options. So we'll talk about that. And I guess we can start, though, with the idea of someone on the team becoming a second star for Oladipo. The guy would be Myles Turner. I mean, every time I talk about Myles Turner in a video, I say the same thing, which is at some point he's going to start shooting threes more. You look at his mid-range jumpers, the form is there. The way the ball goes through the net is there. He's a good enough free throw shooter to suggest that he can be a good three-point guy. It's just got to happen at some point, you know. He only took about 2 threes a game in the playoffs. So eventually, just start shooting threes, Myles. I assume he can do it. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen. And if he does that, I think his scoring unlocks. It makes the rest of the team have an easier time. Yeah, I've said all this before in more detail in other videos, so I don't want to go too in-depth with that. I guess the next thing, is there anyone else after Turner? I mean, probably not, really. Like, Sabonis can be a good center, and if they re-sign Glenn Robinson III, he can be a good role player, but it's pretty much got to be Myles Turner. So, next we look at the Pacers' situation, right? There's draft picks, there's salary situation, and we can see what kind of opportunities they have. Well, they have all of their picks moving forward, all their first rounders, all their second rounders. They've done a good job of holding on to all those. So that's cool. So if any potential stars become available, then they can use those picks to help things out. Now, a pick from the Pacers is probably going to be like in the 20s, so I don't think teams are just going to be lining up to get those, but you know, it helps you out nonetheless. And another interesting thing is that they do have quite a few expiring contracts between Thad Young, Bogdanovich, Darren Collison, Corey Joseph if he accepts the player option. I mean, expirings and first-round picks are always a good fuel for getting in the trade market. So if any quality player becomes available that they're comfortable taking on who has a longer contract, the guy I immediately thought of was Evan Fournier, then that's a good starting point. Now, moving an unprotected first for Fournier is probably a little too much, but something in that realm. Now, if we look at the Pacers' salary, which I'll admit is one of the weirder salaries, just because of there's team options, there's early termination options. Al Jefferson's contract is confusing a lot of the websites that I'll use for team salaries. But nonetheless, this team has money to spend. But I think if I'm interpreting everything correctly, if Al Jefferson, Lance Stevenson, and Joseph Young's team options were declined, then these guys would be at around $75 million in salary, which definitely gives you enough money to get yourself a top-tier player. Now, would you want to let all 3 of those guys go? I mean, Al Jefferson, yes, you let him walk and you don't really think twice about it. Lance Stevenson at $4 million a season. I mean, the thing with Lance is, like, I know he's exciting, and I know he had some moments in the playoffs against the Cavs and the trolling of LeBron, but all the advanced numbers would suggest he was not good for the Pacers this year. He was a minus in the playoffs. On the floor, he was like a 0 in terms of like net rating. In the regular season, it's minuses across the board. I mean, you know, I understand that as a defender, he can do stuff and he can make plays for teammates, but he also takes bad long twos and he can't shoot from outside, and he doesn't really get to the free throw line that often, which hurts his play because of how often he has the ball. I know he's a good rebounder for a guard, but I mean, I think you could probably let Lance Stevenson go and not feel that bad about it. And then as far as Joseph Young is concerned, I mean, between Corey Joseph and Darren Collison, and then Oladipo handling the ball as well, I do think that they have enough in terms of point guard play to where Joseph Young may not really totally be needed. Now we have player options to deal with. Corey Joseph at basically $8 million a season, and Thad Young at about nearly $14 million. I think Thad Young will accept his. I think Corey Joseph will probably accept his as well. I don't know if he can get more than that on the open market. So I think it's safe to say this team's at around $75 million, which right now would give you like $24 million to play with. And then I think the cap, I think it's going to go up a little bit. So this team could be looking at like potentially offering someone like a $25 million contract, which is definitely enough to get yourself a big-time player. I guess the first one you look at is Paul George. I mean, I don't know if that would even be possible. I mean, it'd be possible in terms of money and all that. I don't know if it'd be possible in terms of the personalities involved. I don't think the exit from Indiana was, well, it was kind of ugly, with Paul George saying he doesn't want to come back and all that. But, I mean, in terms of, like, if that were to actually happen, that would be, like, really good because Oladipo and Paul George together could be a pretty damn good 1-2 punch defensively. You'd be great, and also I feel like Oladipo probably has a little bit more oomph to him as like a number one option as opposed to Paul George, but they could basically be like co-options almost because I don't think either one of them are like way better than the other offensively. So that would be cool. I don't know if it would actually happen. Do I think they should take a chance on DeMarcus Cousins? No, not really. They have Myles Turner and all that. The interesting one I've seen is Aaron Gordon. I've heard some people talk about that. I think Gordon and Oladipo together could be really cool in terms of just being a really athletic team who can make a lot of transition buckets. I think Myles Turner can move at least pretty okay for a center in transition. And Aaron Gordon's improvement from 3 this year, while he did taper off towards the end, would be interesting. And if he can improve on that even more and be more consistent, then between like Collison, Oladipo, Bogdanovich, Gordon, and Myles Turner, could be a decent amount of spacing. And even if Gordon doesn't like step up even more as an outside shooter, you could still be okay. I mean, they managed with Thad Young this year, who is not much of a shooter, so that could be a thing. Now in terms of would Gordon start, I mean, he probably would. I think he's a better player than Thad Young is at this point. I know there is the whole veteran versus young guy thing, but it would also give you a decent amount of versatility because you could roll with Gordon at center sometimes, move Bogdanovich down to the 4. You could even sometimes have Gordon and Thad Young. I don't know if that would work, but it could be really devastating in transition. So some interesting things with Gordon. I think him and Oladipo pick and rolls could just be pretty damn good as well. So a lot of intriguing things with Aaron Gordon in Indiana. Now, how much money would I give him in free agency? I mean, I would not give him the full $25 million. I don't think he's that good, but would I feel comfortable throwing like $13 to $15 million at Aaron Gordon? Yes, I would. Whether Orlando would match that or not, I don't know. But I think it's definitely something that the Pacers should think about. Speaking of power forwards, although he was more of a center this season, but Julius Randle, well, I should say he spent basically half his time at the 4 and half his time at the 5. I mean, I think he's pretty damn good at center. You have Myles Turner there, of course. I don't know if you'd want to give Julius Randle however much money you'd have to give him in order for him to come off the bench for you behind Myles Turner. Could you roll with those two together at times? Yeah, potentially. One thing with Randle, though, that is a little fearful is I do think because of this late stretch he's having with the Lakers, And if he was to get a big contract from another team, he may walk in there and think like he's got to be a scorer and all that. And, I mean, he's got some post-up abilities, no doubt. But I don't want the ball out of Oladipo's hands too often, you know? Now, can Randle, Oladipo, pick and rolls be cool? Yeah, it can probably be pretty damn effective. And Randle's ball handling and playmaking could be used effectively. And if Myles Turner can at least stretch out to three, at least corner threes or something, then that could make you really difficult to defend. There's definitely some stuff that Julius Randle could do with the Pacers. I do fear that he may just be he may like to shoot the ball a little too much. And then once we get past him, we're pretty much at guys who are probably not gonna make some big jump to becoming star players. But I mean, I think these are some names that the Pacers should definitely at least consider. But moving past all that, the team's in a good position, man. Like, they surprised everyone. They have a great player on a really good contract. And they got a crap ton of cap space. So even if they don't end up getting a huge, like, second star, there is, there's, like, Will Barton, for example. Maybe he could help him out, be a scorer off the bench sort of deal. So, they're in a good spot. We'll just have to see where they go from here. Oh, and then a new podcast in the description. I gave my round 2 predictions and then Infinity War review. Spoiler free first, and I'm done.